In Our Expert Opinion podcast is brought to you by Saunders Real Estate, the Southeast's leading land and commercial real estate firm, helping clients make bold and informed investment decisions since 1996.
Good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of In Our Expert Opinion podcast. My name's Tyler Davis. Today, I'm joined with one of my really good friends in the industry, Kasey Mock. Kasey is the owner, founder of Mock Ranches. Kasey, welcome to the show.
Hey, Tyler, thanks for having me.
How are things out in Texas today?
Getting hot.
Yeah.
We have had incredible rain, though, in June. June's been very, very wet. Parts of the state that, like, springs were not flowing at all, or they're flowing at record levels we hadn't seen in 5 or 6 years, so it's been good.
That's a blessing. Yeah. Hope that continues.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that rainy time of year down here in Florida, too, where it'll rain, thunderstorm between 2 p.m. and 8 p.m. every day. You just don't know when it's going to hit, but it's going to come through at some point. So, I think we've all kind of entered the rainy season a little bit. But, Kasey, most of our audience is probably Southeast U.S. focused. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, where you're based, where's Stevensville, Texas, and a little bit about your firm and your shop and how you kind of got into the industry.
Yeah, for sure. So I live in Stephenville, Texas, about an hour and a half southwest of Fort Worth. Best known as the rodeo cowboy capital of the world.
That's
awesome.
awesome.
Watch the National Finals Rodeo. 50% of the contestants will be from our hometown right here in Stephenville.
Did you ever do that growing up?
What's that?
Did you ever do that?
Oh, yeah, I rodeo.
Heck yeah.
I was in Fort Worth at the rodeo last week at Northside in the stockyards. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. I didn't say I compete, but I'll interrupt sometimes. How about that?
That's right. Sorry.
I rodeoed in college.
Okay. Gotcha. I didn't know that. Well, sorry for interrupting. Keep going. Yeah.
No, that's all right. It's some guys have ski boats, right? And I have roping horses. So, it's a hobby. It's a lot of fun. Stephenville's very much we've got a Division I university, Tarleton State University here, which is the largest school in the Texas A&M system that's not at College Station. So an ag school. Stephenville's focused on agriculture and healthcare. 65% of the students are on tuition aid, so it targets blue collar agriculture families. And Stephenville's a great community. I grew up just west of Austin, southwest of Austin. Hayes County, for the longest time, was one of the fastest growing counties in the country. My background's all in agriculture and wildlife. So we owned a hunting outfitting business for years. That's how we got in real estate, was that and agricultural consulting. Kept getting pulled into the ranch conversation by our clients, asking us to come help them with their farm ranch land needs. We've done a bunch of property tax consulting, conservation easement stuff, land management, hunting management, ag management. Still do those things today, but been in real estate since 2014. Early last year, we surpassed $1 billion in career sales here in the state, land sales. I've got, I think right now, we've done some pruning. So I think right now we've got 16 agents that work for us.
Every now and then you gotta trim the fat a little bit and do some pruning.
Yeah. Pruning is a kind word. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, good. What's your footprint kind of in Texas right now with your team? What are the types of assets you work on typically, and kind of what regions of the state are you pretty active in right now?
Yeah, our southernmost office, Tyler, is in North Houston. It's like Cypress, Texas, right there north of Houston. Super fast growing area, Montgomery County. We've got offices there, Brenham, College Station, up to Austin and down to San Antonio, Mason, Texas, which is northwest of Fredericksburg, our westernmost office. Then we come back here towards Stephenville, hit a bunch of little ag towns. And then our northernmost office is Fort Worth. So we cover most of the state. We do some big stuff in the Texas Panhandle, in the Trans-Pecos, but those are selective deals. We've got some really good partners out there. If it's a deal that fits them, as do y'all, through RLI.
Yeah, and I think just from a distance, one of the things about Texas as it pertains to the land market is just how big and vast it is. Just from a distance, my view of it. And so, for you guys, how do you talk a little bit about the different regions of the state? Again, our audience is probably a little bit familiar with Texas and just East Texas, West Texas, maybe the Panhandle a little bit, but talk a little bit about the regions of the state and kind of what what drives those values from an ag perspective? What are people really doing in some of these different areas of the state?
Man, we've got nearly every ecoregion that you could find here in Texas. In East Texas, we've got the piney woods, and very good for timber production, much like North Florida. Of course, the coastal bend is coastal prairies, and then very productive farm ground. If you move west, you divide the state. If you just look at a map, like a Google Earth map, you can see a brown line. And about halfway, as you move from east to west, about halfway through the state, things turn brown and the trees get shorter. Then you can track the rainfall there too, So up in the Panhandle, it's much like the rolling plains. And then as you move far west into those Davis Mountains in the Trans-Pecos area, Guadalupe Peak is it's a big mountain, a 12,000 foot mountain with pine trees on it above timberline. So we literally got every ecoregion that you could find here in the state of Texas. But that, as we're licensed professionals, right, we're supposed to work in areas of competency. And so that presents a challenge because when you get licensed, your license doesn't say you've got a commercial real estate license or a farm and ranch real estate license or a residential license. It says you've got a Texas real estate license. So, for us, one thing we really work on is geographic and demographic competency. So we're very specific what our avatar property is. We'll sell a couple of hundred deals a year. Our average deal is, $1.25 million on average. We'll sell some very big ones. We've got one around $20 million under contract currently. So we will sell some big ones. But if you take out the outliers, you take out the smaller residential stuff and take out the really big ones, our average transactions around $1.25 million. And that fits the state. That fits the rural markets of the state, 100-acre tract. And that's why the reason we have those offices spread out is the geographic differences in those markets is quite different, Right. So we have some agents that work, when I say a demographic farm, we have some agents that just like to work on a specific avatar owner, somebody that might work in commercial agriculture or farming, or they just work on hunting properties around the state. And so some of them cover a very large territory.
Yeah, and that is a challenge, I'm sure, with just the uniqueness that is each one of these markets and the different types of products that you're working on. And while you're licensed in Texas, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily the expert on one type of asset class, even though you could work it. Sometimes it is good to bring in somebody else to team up with and partner with who's in those markets. And if you are going to cover those territories, you need to be in those specific regions, right? Have the local touch, the local feel. Who's the typical buyer for something that's $1.5 million in Texas? Is that a recreational type buyer that is looking for a weekend getaway, or is this somebody that is wanting to kind of operate a farm day to day? Is it a little bit of everything?
Tyler, depending on the year, 30 to 50% of what we do will go to investors. So it's pre-development stuff. Our state's getting fragmented at a rapid rate. I don't always love that, Yeah. But as our mutual friends up in the mountains, Dan Murphy and Seth Kraft at M4, it's very realistic that they get to sell the same place every 5 years in the same configuration. It's pretty rare for us. We sell a large ranch. It's very, very rare that you'll get to see that ranch in its same configuration again. So because of that, and where prices have been and the pattern of fragmentation and the growth patterns here in Texas, much like Central Florida, most of what we're selling at some point, the exit strategy is probably development, as much as I don't always like that. We sell a lot of stuff up and down the I-35 corridor. That's to the big production builders, D.R. Horton, Pulte, Lennar, KB. We do sell, a third of our farm inventory anyway, because up and down the I-35 corridor, just, use an imaginary line, east of that's Blackland Prairie, and to the west gets into hill country and little rockier soil. So that Blackland Prairie is very conducive to high density tract home subdivision. But as you get development there, it really squeezes agriculture. The co-ops start to shut down, and the cotton gins and the cell barns start to shut down. Then it comes a point where it's difficult for farmers to just move equipment. To move a combine through a residential area is pretty tough. And so we'll have a bunch of sellers every year that say we can no longer do agriculture here, unfortunately, but we'd like to stay in agriculture. So we're able to take that landowner, position their property for development. and then help them move to another part of the state where they can be in agriculture through the next generation or two, utilize 1031 exchanges there. So that's a percentage of our business. As you move west off of the corridor, most of it will become hunting focused or recreational buyers. And, they don't always have a subdivision plan. Those people, they like to hunt. It's a place to bug out, place to get away. White-tailed deer's king in Texas, so we have ample amount of deer hunters.
Yeah. And for background for the audience, I was on your podcast a few weeks ago, so please go check that out. When we had a lot of some of these same conversations about the similarities between our markets, right? The amount of population growth that's happened in Florida and Central Texas, kind of where you're at, and the Triangle, Greater Triangle. It is hard for agriculture owners and farmers in those markets when, there's neighborhoods next door to them. And the pressure to sell to development is really, hard for a lot of people to process, and they don't want to do that. But the values have gotten so high that, and the difficulties to farm in some of these areas it makes it impossible. And so for a lot of people, we've done some similar work where we'll help a family here in Central Florida sell out to development, but 1031 into something in North Florida or Lower Alabama or South Georgia. And honestly, they can buy a lot more land and continue doing similar types of ag work up there that they were doing here. And, it is sad and challenging for a lot of these families to kind of go through that when it's a generational property, or somebody who grew up here, was born on this property, and this is their lifestyle and their identity. But at the same time, it is good that 1031 exchanges exist, that there's other parts of the state that are more conducive to ag. One thing that Florida has been very good about over the years has been conservation funding and making sure that landowners have another option, to sell their development rights to the state, still continue to farm and cash out on some of the benefit of the appreciation of what they're sitting on in terms of their land value, but not be forced to sell fee simple to the state or forced to sell fee simple to the developer. So what is Texas doing from a conservation perspective? Are there really good programs in Texas? Does Texas put funding in place to kind of similar to Florida to allow landowners to stay where they're at and not have to sell and move out? Or is that something that they haven't really gotten off the ground yet?
Yeah, Texas is so property rights centered. We're 95%, soon to maybe be 94% privately owned. There was a big ranch that recently sold out by Big Bend, and that ranch the states can end up rolling a bunch of that into Big Bend, which is going to be really cool to see that park expand its boundaries. But let's call us 95% privately held, and have always been very, very much pro property owners, pro property rights. There's no state funding for conservation, though, and there's a good bit of conservation work been done by the Nature Conservancy out in the Trans-Pecos region. And then we work really closely with the Hill Country Conservancy, which is a land trust around the Austin area. San Antonio has one. SAWS, San Antonio Water Supply, has one where they're pursuing easements out through like the Edwards Plateau and the recharge areas of the Edwards Aquifer. So, one of the big everything conservation in Texas, unless it's the one-offs that are legacy minded, majority of it's all around groundwater.
Yeah.
My grandparents used to say that, one day groundwater be worth more than oil. And you think, and they also said, Austin's going to be connected to San Antonio. And when I was a kid, I'm 12, 13 years old, I would drive my dad's truck to church or drive to town, stick shift, diesel pickup, and I've got to cross I-35. And you would look both ways and you think there's no way they're going to be connected. Yeah.
And now it's
Austin,
all big.
When I was a kid, we never went into Austin. It seemed like so far away. And now they're connected.
Yeah.
I mean, every exit.
That's how Lakeland is here in I-4 too. It was, 40 miles to Tampa and 50 miles to Orlando. Now it's one place.
Everything revolves around water. Everything revolves around water. We've got the Edwards Aquifer, very, very prolific aquifer that recharges here locally through karst features, limestone karst features. Our aquifers in the Panhandle do not recharge here in our state. The Ogallala aquifer does not recharge here. Majority of the water gets used up there, but they do not recharge there. And then the coastal, there's a very big aquifer on the coastal bend, which they're starting to pump water up to Central Texas from. All that said, most of our conservation work is funded by people that have interest in that water. And so they're trying to conserve the what the conservation funding does is it limits impervious cover and encourages sound management of that surface so that we get recharge. I worked for the Texas AgriLife Extension Service out of college. I was a county extension agent, and I would carry this rainfall simulator around, and it had, of course, bare ground where almost 100% of the water runs off. And then you have turf grass like you'd have on a golf course, and majority of the water ran off. And then you would have an overgrazed situation of native grass. And then you would have a healthy native grass situation where you've got Texas little blue stem or switchgrass or Indian grass that's got a 3 or 4 foot plant that you would see above surface, and the roots are that big too. And 85-90% of that water would end up going through the surface into the aquifer. So most of our conservation work is around surface management for groundwater recharge. There are a couple of land trusts, Texas Ag Land Trust, that just focuses on conserving ag land in Texas. I saw they signed a new easement and closed on a new conservation easement this week, which is exciting. Those are legacy. Those are more legacy easements where a family is voluntarily putting an easement in because they want to see it in production long term. But funding for our easements here is all private.
Yeah,
so
private donation
funding for them. Yeah, it's done. NRCS, federal government, they do get involved in some. A county, Hayes County, Bexar County, Travis County, they get involved in some, particularly if there's a public interest in that, maybe some public access, or if they have a really strong interest in the groundwater under that place, they will get involved some. But the majority of it is privately funded. The land trust hold fundraisers, and there's wealthy individuals that fund those.
And primarily what drives the value to those, or the ranking of what gets an easement, how those funds are allocated, is proximity to water availability, things like that.
Yes,
is kind of the primary driver, as opposed to, in Florida, it's certainly water and proximity to protected areas and things like that. But the wildlife corridor to protect, endangered species and things like that in Florida is important. But really, the closer you are to some of these development markets and things like that, if you're in a approved Florida Forever project boundary, you can get funding, and certain things like that can kind of drive the needle a little bit in terms of the urgency to do that, just to preserve some of this land in close proximity to metro markets. Yeah.
Correct. Outside of migratory game birds, we don't really have we don't have mammals that migrate. Like, in the western states, you'll conserve migration corridors for elk and mule deer and antelope. We don't have that issue here, so we're not preserving migration corridors.
Gotcha.
Except for, some migratory game birds and things.
Right. So just at a high level, what's the state of the Texas land market right now? We got together, broke bread together in San Antonio a few months ago for the Texas A&M Land Conference market update, which is really great. Heard a little bit there, but share with our audience kind of what you're seeing in the market. Interesting time right now with high interest rates, tariffs, just kind of a weird residential market we're in at the moment, I think. Overall, what are you seeing across the Texas land market? Is it still solid, or deals pricing coming down, pricing staying steady, going up? Kind of fill our audience in on what's going on in Texas.
I'd say the market's soft, Tyler. It's soft. Transaction counts down. I was just looking at some numbers from Austin, Houston, Fort Worth, and San Antonio areas, and the market's down 20 to 25%. Prices, though, if you look at total dollar volume spent, it's kind of flat. It's not down. It's consistent. Transactions are down. Units are down. Listing inventory is way up, 35%, 40% up in some markets of inventory. And so if you put those together and say, well, how is there fewer transactions happening, but dollar volume's the same? What you get to is, what do the buyers want?
Big.
They only want the good inventory at the moment.
Yeah.
They only want, it's a deal or a diamond. And so if it's not a deal, it better be a diamond. There's more demand right now for diamonds than there are deals. And so what we're seeing is, the better the piece of property, the bigger the deal, the more demand there is for it. Our median market, that $1 to $4 million market is probably the slowest market in the business.
Is a lot of that levered,
Yeah, most
mortgage.
of that is levered.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Most of that is levered or exchanged. And so because our luxury markets are down, commercial markets are down, you see fewer 1031 exchanges. And so that's usually that market, that middle of the market right there is usually either levered or it's exchanged.
Or it's a guy selling a commercial something and wanting to go be a cowboy and buy some land. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, that's right. And the commercial market squeezed by a lot of things, the economy, but also just we grew so much, Tyler, in the last 8 of the last 10 years. We started to slow down in 22. The second half of 22, and we personally had over $100 million in contracts come out of escrow in the second half of 22. Contracts with earnest money and option money down, and buyers said, market doesn't look good in the future. We're stepping away. We had one yesterday do that. I was talking to a broker that's very active in the Dallas-Fort Worth market, and she said right now 35% of this isn't great news always for everybody, but it's just the truth of news. 35% of contracts at escrow right now are being terminated in the Dallas-Fort Worth, in that greater Dallas-Fort Worth metro area. So 1 out of 3, 1 out of 3 contracts that make it to contract are being terminated. So it just shows a little lack of buyer confidence, I think, but it creates a tremendous opportunity for buyers to come in a market that was really surging, a market where there was a couple of years ago, multiple offers on everything. Today, a buyer can come in and can really negotiate price or terms. And we're able to see where a seller's motivation is. You know, if a seller says, look, I need to sell this, there are certainly buyers, and we can find buyers. We have a guaranteed sell in 90-day program where we can find buyers in a short period of time at today's market price. Or if they say, look, I would sell for this price one day, I just have to talk to him about what those terms are going to look like and what that timeline looks like. Yeah. So Texas land's, much like Florida, Texas land's is in high demand still, but there's some price sensitivity. And we're seeing the impacts of fragmentation, the impacts of limits on our transportation, limits on our water. The development properties are difficult at the moment because a lot of our local groundwater districts and local water providers, water co-ops are just stressed out. And so, they're not out of water, but they just can't provide any more to you today.
Yeah. That's the big question here is, even if utilities are at the site, is there capacity? Is there availability?
Correct. So like between New Braunfels and right there along that I-35 corridor today, most development projects are going to take 2 years to get approved. 2 years to get approved for water and sewer. So can we get them under contract? Yes, you can. But a buyer's not going to pay market value for those. They're not going to pay market value for those if there's not guaranteed water and sewer utilities. And then 2 years from now, the risk is 2 years from now, if there's been other growth, other projects approved, if you're the one that puts the traffic signal over capacity, and the way it works here in Texas is you, the developer, you're the one that gets to pay for the new lanes on the Farnham Market Road or on the state highway, and the traffic signal costs to be passed on to you. So who's that cost get passed on to?
The timing of that. Yeah. Right.
It gets passed on to the seller.
Yeah. True.
The developer can't just charge more money for the rooftops. You can't charge an extra $15 a square foot for this house compared to the neighboring development because your cost of development was higher here. So that always gets passed to the seller. So, it's a tight market, but gosh, great opportunities both for buyers looking to invest here in the state with a little less competition, and sellers that are willing to get a property ready right now are really standing out. So our staging business is really helping people where we can help stage a ranch, get it ready to bring to market. I think the biggest aha, and I'm sorry for such a long answer.
No, this is excellent.
I think the biggest aha is buyers are there, but they don't have a ton of extra cash to spend on the place after they close it. So if a buyer comes in and says, look, I'll buy that place and I'll spend the money that it appraises for or the cash price, they don't want to have to go spend another $500,000 getting it ready and cleaned up and repairing fences. Yeah. Because that money doesn't seem to be there today.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think we're seeing some of the same things. I mean, there's there's certainly buyers there. It depends on the asset type. Recreational value is still very strong for hunting land and timberland and ranches here in Florida.
Yeah.
Farmland prices have been impacted by commodity prices and labor issues like you guys in Texas and kind of everybody all over. We're seeing kind of similar stuff to what you're seeing of larger transactions still happening, and there still being a robust market for those. And I think it's, while there's some short-term fluctuation and potential concerns about economically where we're headed and what's going on, that's scared off some of the, smaller size buyers like you were mentioning. The institutional guys, the high net worth family office guys, those people are still buying up large pieces if they're priced right and if they're really good pieces.
Very much so.
So I think it's, and probably the same thing in Texas, it's people being very confident to park large amounts of capital as an investment in the state, land appreciation over time, and they're not necessarily that concerned with kind of short-term fluctuations and things like that. So it's kind of interesting because you'd probably expect the opposite, but it's the larger stuff is really doing well, whereas it's sometimes the kind of medium price, smaller things that are probably more impacted by interest rates and availability of loans and things like that than some of these other pieces. And development wise, there's certain segments of development land that we work on that's doing really well. Some of the home builders are still out buying a bunch of stuff. Some of them have kind of pressed pause or slowed down a little bit, but there's also a lot of guys that are kind of middleman buyers that'll say, okay, I know a seller wants to get out right now and they don't want to wait 2 or 3 years for a home builder to close, and I'll come in and I'll close quick, and it won't be at full market price, but I'll close quick. I'll go get this thing fully permitted. Kind of while, you're saying the staging thing, it's the same thing on development land where people are saying, or even sellers saying, I'll go get this thing fully permitted while we're kind of waiting on uncertainty to subside. But overall, I think if we get some more optimism, consumer market confidence, I think there is a lot of pent up demand for certain types of land here in Florida and probably in Texas too, and assets in general that, I think if we can get people a little bit more optimistic, if we can get a couple interest rate cuts later this year, I think that would go a long way towards people kind of re-entering the market.
Yeah, we're same thing. Maturity on all parts is showing up to help things be successful. Patient money is able to make buys today. So much of our market over the last, at least over my career, has been people that want to come in and get out within 18 months. They want to come in. There's been a big opportunity to come in and buy a ranch, put roads in, put fences in, put blinds, set it up for hunting, maybe not even build a house because that's pretty user specific. Mm-hmm. Good piece of land is what's hard to find. Improvements you can tear down, build, modify, whatever you want. So I think, at least in our business, I'm a land guy. I put the emphasis on the piece of ground. That's what we're shopping for. The house is the bonus. We're shopping for a piece of ground. There's been a big opportunity in the last 10, 15 years to come in and buy a place and make some improvements and then turn your money over every 18 to 24 months. Well, today I'm having to tell people it's always a good investment. The good time to purchase a good piece of real estate is always, the answer is always today. It's always today, and time's always your friend on that. But I'm having to tell our people now, you may need to be prepared to hold that for 5 years to get the return that you want.
Right.
And the the narrative for everybody who's investing today is cash flow, cash flow, cash flow, cash flow. And land doesn't produce much of that.
It produces big chunks. If you're an investor, it can produce big chunks if you do it right, if that's your game plan. But there's not much steady cash flow with it. Yeah.
No, my wife and my financial advisor both tell me that looks like a liability on my balance sheet until I sell it.
That's
and when I sell it, I'm like, look, you like that, don't you? But yeah, no, that's what we're seeing. So maturity and patience is really showing up. Professionalism on the broker side is so important. Mm-hmm. It's so important as we go try to help buyers and sellers be successful. And there's another broker on the other side. If that broker has not studied the market, and that broker or agent, they haven't studied the market, they haven't had the hard conversations and the realistic conversations with their client early on, expectations are really hard to meet because they haven't been set.
Right.
So spending a lot of time coaching our clients, making sure this is the time to sell it. As much as we'd love to do another deal tomorrow, the best time to do a deal for our clients is when it's the best time for our clients.
That's right.
And so sitting down and having that conversation with them and being realistic about what the market looks like, what the expectation is for performance, timeline, return, and telling them if this is the time to sell, let's do that. If it's next year or the year after, let's prep your property for that, and you're going to be better positioned when the market does pick up to move. But overall, every day's exciting, baby.
Not all brokers are straightforward and client focused, as we all know, but
probably single digits.
Yeah, correct. And one of the things, Kasey, that I want our audience to know is that you're, one of the things I admire about you among many is how much you advocate for the land brokerage community, how much you're always there to help people get the word out about what they're doing, and some of the coaching things that you do as well, your mastermind stuff. You talk to a lot of brokers, you talk to a lot of people in the industry. What are some of the traits that stand out among kind of the top producers and high character brokers and people that you run across? It can be clients as well, but what are some of the things that you look for in your guys on your team, and just how is some of your work kind of within the land brokerage community, both on the conversations and coaching type stuff? How is that? What are some of your takeaways from that in terms of consistent things that you see among people?
Our industry can put off an image that's a little bit false, and that is a lot of people get into land brokerage because they had a deer lease growing up, or their grandpa had a ranch, or they like to ride horses, and they see on Instagram, I suppose, that it looks like that's a lot of what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but the truth of the matter is, most of our clients are trusting us with one of, if not their single largest asset, and they're one of the largest financial transactions they will ever make. And so the level of professionalism and the level of communication skills that I think are required to be successful in this business are very high. It's not as much as people try to make it, it's not a personality-based business. There is a unique personality type that tends to thrive in it. Somebody that has just a lot of God-given endurance. Just that's the truth. People that have a lot of endurance tend to do good. People that are very assertive, problem solvers, they don't run from conflict. People that are willing to lean into challenges. And then they need some background in the asset. They do need some background in the asset, but it's not every day hunting, fishing, being on ranch. Probably 20% of what we do is actually being on the land. The rest of it's solving problems for landowners.
And when you're on the land, you're not hanging out. I mean, you're out there working, you're putting up a sign, you're doing a showing, you're meeting with the owners and being professional. It's not, hey, I want to list your property and I want to go hunt on it on the weekends.
Our clients don't want to pay us to be on vacation.
Correct.
That's the truth of the matter.
Correct. They want to see us out there
the
working.
truth is, what's that?
They want to see us out there working, trying to sell the asset.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So as I do coach a lot of agents around the country, active in Realtors Land Institute, as are you and your whole firm. Most, half of our agents have earned their accredited land consultant designation. Something we really lean into inside our firm and try to encourage the industry is just the importance of continuing to learn and perfect and master what we do for our clients. Like inside of our firm, we'll coach and train over 200 hours a year with our agents. Wow. It's every day. You go into an insurance office or a car dealer or an investment firm, and what are they going to have? Every morning they're going to have a morning stand-up. Here's our objective today. Here's what we're focused on. Any questions? Ready, break.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're going to get that's their way of sticking the needle in everybody and pumping them up every morning. To go
kick off every morning.
Yeah, kick off. And so we do that every morning with our team to make sure everybody's operating as a team. It's a highly leveraged team. And what I mean by that is not that we're borrowing a ton of money, because we don't. We've always been debt free from day one. But we have a lot of leverage available to our agents. Very big staff, as do you. Big staff, big team supporting them so that they can spend their time on client-facing activities. Because you have to be so present with our clients to really hear and understand what their needs are and provide the level of service. And we talked about this a lot, that we all have nothing that we try to do. None of our initiatives, none of our plans will work if we're not each individually fulfilling our customer service promise. And so it's really important to us that if you hire Matt in our Bastrop office or John Henry or myself or any of them, Morgan and Mason, that the experience and the customer service is the same because it's a very high expectation, I believe.
That's a great takeaway. Yeah. If you have that, if you demand out a lot of your people and have a bar that everybody has to hit, that kind of raises everybody's game a little bit.
Yes, sir. It does.
So this has been fun to talk about Texas. I'll get you out of here in just a second, but I grew up, or I didn't grow up in Texas. I was born in Texas. I don't know if you knew that. Lived in Houston for a few years, so it's always fun to talk about Texas. I can wear my Texas flag hat when I need to, but I wanted to do some quick hitters with you. All right, the goal of this is to kind of get, again, our audience is Southeast. I don't know if we have a lot of listeners in Texas, but to get a little bit of your thoughts on some things that people think of when they think of Texas. All right. So quick hitters. You ready? All right. So how real is Friday Night Lights? How big is football in Texas?
Oh man. The only thing bigger than football in Texas is maybe deer hunting, but it's real. You drive through rural Texas, the biggest high school stadiums. It's unbelievable. The high school stadiums cost more than most college stadiums. We just built one here in Stephenville, and it's larger, and we have a Division I university here. The new high school stadium is larger than the college stadium.
Wow. I got to come out and visit, man. That sounds like a great spot. All right. How many times have you been to the Alamo?
A couple of dozen.
Couple dozen, like 36? Are we talking 24, 36?
I mean, more than 20? I don't know. I mean, more than 20. I've probably done the full tour 6 or 7 times. Yeah.
I went.
Interesting when what's that?
I went when we were in San Antonio. I went that day and did the tour my first time. So
when it's interesting when there were all the riots a few years ago. I won't get political on your podcast. If it was mine, I might, but I won't on yours. When there was all the riots a few years ago, there's a lot of vandalism of historic sites, and there was a march of people who said they were going to the Alamo to deface the Alamo, and the Alamo defenders actually showed up. This is in 2022, I believe. The Alamo defenders actually showed up, stood outside the Alamo, armed, and said, "You didn't take it back then. You're not taking it now."
How about that? All right, Texas A&M or UT?
Texas A&M all the way.
Aggies, Ag School.
That's it.
12th man. All right, does everybody in Texas drive a King Ranch Edition F-150 or Expedition?
Only the ones who live in the city.
Oh, that's a good answer. Yeah, I like that. That's good.
I've owned a King Ranch. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Best brisket in Texas?
Terry Black's Barbecue in Lockhart.
In Lockhart. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Not been there, but that is on my list.
Terry Black's. There's a couple of other. I think he has 3 locations. There's one in Fort Worth, one in Austin, and one in Lockhart, I believe.
Okay. Gotcha. How many? Or did you watch Landman, and is that accurate of the oil industry in Texas?
I did not watch Landman. No, I hadn't watched it. I've seen some clips of it. From what I've heard, it's fairly accurate. But I did not watch Landman.
Okay, I've watched a few episodes. I gotta get back to it. How many Texas flags do you own?
Just one. Hanging in my tack room in the barn.
Okay, there you go. Heck yeah, that's a pretty good answer. All right, last one: the Riverwalk or the Stockyards?
Oh, Stockyards, man.
All the way?
Stockyards all the way. Yeah, you ride your horse in there. I was at the rodeo at the Stockyards last week. Yeah, we roped. Everybody got our spurs on, walk across to the bar and have a burger and a drink, and afterwards, all right. Stockyards all the way.
We got to plan that out. Next time you're going up there, you call me. I'll bring Dean. I'll bring Trent. We'll get Dan and Seth with them 4 and get those guys flying in. We'll have a big time in the Stockyards.
You got to come see us. Stay at Hotel Drover. Go to the Stockyards. Go to the rodeo. Go eat at Joe T. Garcia's. We'll give you the whole experience.
All right, that's what I'm wanting, man. That's what I'm wanting, and we can return the favor down here in Florida. Although it's probably not quite as cool as the Stockyards, but we can go to the beach or something. So, all right. Well, thanks again for joining me, Kasey.
Get you and Dean on a horse, and I'll come to Florida.
Right. There we go. We'll do that. That's a deal. How can people find out more of your content, your website, things like that? Kind of give us the plug.
Yeah, our website's mockranches.com, MOCK ranches.com. My podcast is the Land Broker Insider Podcast. You can find Land Broker Insider anywhere. We put out, just like you guys do, we put out a magazine every year. That's kind of our annual report and client-facing magazine. It's called the Landowner Insider Magazine. Happy to send you one of those. You can subscribe to that through our website or info@mockranches.com.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Kasey. Appreciate your friendship. Appreciate you being on here, and appreciate everything you do for the industry. So we'll have you on here again soon. And thanks everybody for listening.
Thank you for listening to In Our Expert Opinion Real Estate Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you never miss any of our upcoming episodes. For more on land and commercial real estate, please connect with us at saundersrealestate.com.